Firstly, if you're receiving seed lots that are coming from abroad or even in the UK, check them. If you're even slightly suspicious that there might be a problem with Pea Bruchid, please report it to us and then we can confirm or not. So that's one of the most important things, and that will prevent us planting live insects that might then survive in crops.
That was the PGRO's Becky Howard, who's joining me this morning to talk about Pea Bruchid. As growers begin to plan their drilling for 2026, we've caught up with Becky about the situation around the pest, which was discovered in a couple of UK locations last year. I'm Ben Pike, your host for today, and you're listening to Inside the Pod from the Processors and Growers Research Organisation. So I'm joined by Becky today, Becky Howard from the PGRO. Good morning, Becky. Thanks for joining me.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, we've caught up with each other a couple of times this week because it's been quite a busy week for the PGRO. We're recording this on Friday the 30th of January. So this week we've had the Yen conference on Tuesday where we announced that the PGRO will be taking on responsibility for the Pulse Yen later this year. So stay tuned for more updates on that. And then, Becky, we saw each other at the From Soya to Sustainability conference on Wednesday. We're doing a special pod about that later on, early in February. How did you find it before we sort of touch on Pea Bruchid? How was that conference for you?
Really, really interesting, actually, and very well attended. I think everybody enjoyed the conversations that we had at FSTS on Wednesday. We had some really great speakers and some breakout groups, workshops that generated a lot of discussion about best practice in pulses. So a really great day, Ben, I think.
Yeah, really good. I think very positive feedback from everybody. If you weren't there, there's plenty of content coming your way where you can catch up on some of the key messages from the workshops that Becky's talking about, but also the keynote speakers and some of the researchers who presented the findings from their data from their work on the NCS project. So that's coming your way shortly. But we're here to talk about Pea Bruchid today. Becky, you want to give us a bit of a rundown of, first let's start with what happened last year to refresh everybody's memories, because we talked about this later in the summer, and I dare say it slipped off a few people's radars. So what happened last year, and bring us up to date with where we are.
Yeah, so 2025, as everybody knows, was a very warm season. It is the first year in pea production that we've seen the survival of Pea Bruchids through the whole life cycle in a pea crop in the UK. And it was recorded at 2 sites, one at Landbeach in Cambridgeshire and one at Stubton in Lincolnshire. Those are the 2 only confirmed sites that we've got, and we have had other inquiries from people that have thought that they might possibly have it, but they've been confirmed as not being present in those other sites. So we know at the moment that we've got these 2 sites. It's unusual that the pest is a regulated non-quarantine pest. So although we don't have to report it in crops, it has to be reported in imported seed that comes into the UK, and actually for seed growers of peas as well. So if you're growing peas in the UK and you think that you've got this pest in crops, then it also has to be reported and managed before that seed can be used. It's a pest that's very similar to bean bruchid. Its life cycle is very similar, and the damage that it causes is very similar. So it moves in countries where it's endemic. It moves into the crop in the spring when temperatures reach about 18 degrees. It has to feed on pea pollen to become reproductive. It can feed on other flowers in order to survive if there's no pea flowers present, but it must feed on pea pollen, and it's specific to peas. It is a different species from the bean bruchid. Once it's fed on the pollen in the peas, it will then lay eggs on the pods, and these are a yellow-orange colour. The larvae hatch directly into the pod and into the seed below, and they feed in the peas, and then in combining peas, they'll emerge as an adult, and they'll either move into overwintering sites, which are the surrounding field margins or trees, or they'll stay in the seed and they can be overwinter in the seed. And this is where we think the problem has arisen in 2025, is from seed samples that are imported into the UK that have had live insects in them, and because they were planted in warm, dry conditions in 2025, they've survived that process, which in the UK doesn't always happen, but certainly last year we think that's part of the reason why we've seen it in these two crops. The damage is obviously significant in peas, so we not only do we have the visible damage which causes the reduction of quality of peas, so that circular hole in the pea or presence of live adults in the pea, and in vining peas of course we've got the larvae present in peas if they're there, but actually because the insect itself is the same size as a bean bruchid, but of course peas are much smaller than beans, we get an impact on yield because a lot of the peas or the cotyledon of the pea is destroyed, and germination capacity. So it's a problem for everybody. And so fortunately, currently the situation is that we think these two sites are isolated still. We have developed testing techniques at PGRO using molecular techniques to identify the bruchid itself, the adult bruchid, so we can now confirm whether it is or isn't a bruchid if people are sending queries to us, and that's really helped us with trying to sort of determine where we are with it.
You asked growers last year to send you any suspected crops that you think might have been damaged or indeed be infested with the bruchid. Did you have many people sending samples in?
Not many actually, which is quite reassuring. We had 3 additional ones which we confirmed were not Pea Bruchid. And the reason that I think this has happened is because the damage can sometimes look like pea moth damage. And so it's reasonably easy to confuse the two, although I would say with Pea Bruchid it's a very distinctive circular hole. Pea moth damage can do that, but usually it's a bit more, it looks like chewing to the seed basically. And of course, there is a possibility that you get a random bean bruchid crawling into a pea sample, and we think that's what's happened. So right now, we've had no other reports of confirmed pea bruchid in other crops in the UK, which is quite reassuring.
Encouraging, yeah, that's good news that we haven't found it elsewhere. But I guess the whole reason we're talking about this now, obviously drilling's coming up, there is a huge importance on keeping the situation as it is at the moment. We've talked about this before in saying that we've got this one opportunity to get on top of the pest. We don't want it to become endemic to the UK. So what are you advising growers to do?
Yeah, I think it's really important, and it's why now is the best time really to talk to people about it, really. There are a few things that we're asking growers to do. There are, as you know, Ben, it's anything we ask growers to do is voluntary. We can't enforce in the UK, except for seed, of course. So firstly, if you're receiving seed lots that are coming from abroad or even in the UK, check them. If you're even slightly suspicious that there might be a problem with Pea Bruchid, please report it to us and then we can confirm or not. So that's one of the most important things, and that will prevent us planting live insects that might then survive in crops. We are asking in the 2 areas where we've confirmed Pea Bruchid in 2025, so that was Landbeach in Cambridgeshire, Stubton in Lincolnshire. We're asking growers to consider a 5-mile restriction zone around each of those villages where peas are not grown. And I know that the industry and the trade are also working with their growers to help us make sure that there are no peas in that 5-mile restriction zone. We will send out a bulletin today or early next week just to show people where those restriction zones are and how far they go. Within that zone and in a wider 10-mile zone, we are at PGRO monitoring within those zones. And in a 10-mile zone around each of those villages, if growers are growing peas, we would ask them as well to monitor carefully. And when I say monitoring, I think firstly, look at seed before you plant it. Secondly, once the crop starts growing and we get into sort of mid to late April and temperatures go up, they can be looking for adults, but by far the easiest way to determine whether you've got them in a crop is to look for eggs on pods, to be certain. There is some chemistry in peas that may help us manage it, but we really don't want to get to that point. We want to stop this before it gets into crops. Reporting is really important to us because it helps us better understand what the situation is. And in seed, particularly, growers must report any live insects, and they should be disinfecting seed where that is the case. That's guidance from AFA, so that's not really negotiable.
So when you're asking growers, just to be absolutely clear, when you're asking them to check seed, people are having big bags delivered with lots of seeds to be loaded into the drill. How can they go about that, and how sort of vigilant do they need to be in terms of checking each consignment?
Yeah, I mean, they can normally you take a sample, taking random points within a seed lot that you take. So you're taking a representative sample and a reasonably large sample out of that bulk load. And you can send them to us, or you can have a look yourself. What you're actually looking for at this point is probably if there's live insects within the seed, what you would be looking for is a translucent window on the surface of the pea. You may see, once you start to move the seed around, or if you're in a warm room when you're trying to look for them, what will probably happen is the beetles will emerge from the seed, so you're likely to see live insects crawling around once they start to warm up, or if they get moved. They're quite reactive to sort of movement, and so those are really the two things that you should be looking for. If you see holes and you don't see any insects at all, or if you're seeing dead insects only and no live insects, then there's no action required from that point. But it's the live insects we're trying to manage. If you're at all unsure, you can send a sample to us and we can have a look.
And are people being encouraged to use the app as well to report it? Is that the best way to get in touch, or is there another way that you like it?
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way. So if you have the PGRO Crop Monitor app on your phone, there is a reporting. It's mainly a reporting app anyway, so you can just put where you are, what you found, send a photo. If you don't have the app, then there is an email address that you can send queries to, which is plantclinic@pgro.org. And those will come directly to me. So I think those are the two key things. If you want to call us, of course, that's also fine.
So looking ahead to the growing season, this is obviously stage one. We want to try and stop any Pea Bruchid from being present in the seed for it to develop and grow on. Then, what's going to be, do you think, the next stage? Is it going to be sort of near flowering? Are we going to need to sort of do some very close pod inspections?
Yes, there's no traps available that I'm aware at the moment for Pea Bruchid, so it is crop monitoring that's required, and we will monitor at least 3 sites within the 2 zones at PGRO, so we'll be monitoring them ourselves. There are a few things that you can do. You can either sweep net in a crop, which is probably the most effective way, and do it on a warm afternoon. Don't do it when it's cold, because that will be less effective. During flowering and before pod set, at very early pod set, you can start to check for eggs on pods. The products that we have in peas, I'm hoping we don't get to this point, but the products that we have in peas are systemic, so they are likely to give us slightly better control than we have in beans, for instance, but we would much prefer not to get to that point, really.
And are you reasonably confident that we can get to most pea growers in the sort of 5 mile radius that we've identified? I know we behind the scenes, there's a huge group of people from across the industry helping to spread this message. But we are asking people to voluntarily do this. Are you fairly confident that we can get to most growers, or all growers that we need to?
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, as you say, we're working closely with the industry. There's been a lot of information sent out, and I know the seedsmen and the traders are working directly with the growers to help to ensure that. It is always difficult, as you know, but it's in everybody's best interests to follow the guidance, really, because it affects everybody if we don't manage it. So yeah, I'm reasonably confident. I mean, as far as you ever can be, really. So, but I would strongly encourage people to follow the guidance. It's very important at this stage, at this early stage.
So Becky's produced a very sort of comprehensive 2-pager, which we're publishing on pgro.org now, if you would like to revisit some of the advice that you've heard this morning. So it's really about checking whether you're in the radius of the 5-mile zones. If you can avoid planting peas, that's what we're advising you to do in that area. And then monitoring your seed and reporting any suspected infestations to the PGRO using the app, or indeed by calling PGRO, and the numbers are on the website. Becky, is there any other messages you'd like to give to growers and agronomists listening to this, or have we sort of got across everything that we wanted to?
I think, yeah, just be vigilant, particularly agronomists and growers that are doing their own agronomy. If you have any doubts, just come to PGRO and ask us. And if we end up in a situation where anybody has a problem in crops, then we'll go to the next stage and talk about how we manage that.
Great. Well, thank you very much for talking us through that this morning, Becky. Hopefully that's been a useful whistle-stop tour of where we are with Pea Bruchid. You'll be hearing a lot more from us in the next few weeks and months about this topic. I say we have one opportunity to try and keep on top of this before it becomes a wider issue for the industry. So thank you very much for your time this morning, Becky.
Thank you, Ben.
Nice to talk to you. And as I said at the start of the show, we are about to reveal a number of pieces of content relating to the Yen, and also from Soya to Sustainability Conference. That'll be available on this platform, but also on YouTube and through the website. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be back shortly with our next episode. But until then, thanks very much for listening and have a good weekend.